Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law & Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. We are going to be bringing you right now an update in the trial against Lori Vallow Daybell out of Boise, Idaho. You know this is the one we've been covering, the Doomsday cult mom, the 49-year-old who's charged with the murders of her two youngest children, Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow, but she is also facing charges, a conspiracy charge in connection with the death of her husband's first wife, Tammy Daybell. Now, as we know, the children were found buried in her husband Chad Daybell's backyard, his pet cemetery, in June of 2020. He is going to stand trial on his own at a later date, facing very similar charges. But I do want to talk about what happened on Friday in court. And the jury saw these text messages that were recovered from Vallow Daybell's iCloud account. And the victims in this case, along with Lori's former husband, Charles Vallow, her former deceased husband, were all referred to as obstacles. With us to break all this down is Law & Crime's very own Gigi McKelvey, who is outside the Ada County Courthouse now. She has been our eyes and our ears about what has been happening in that courtroom. Gigi, it's so good to see you. I want to get right into this. Friday was a relatively short day, but it doesn't mean it was less impactful because, as I was mentioning, the jury did get to hear from a former FBI specialist who was on the case since, my understanding, the beginning. And it's also my understanding that he was there when the bodies were actually found and that he was the one to go through Lori's iCloud account. Can you bring us up to speed on his testimony?
So he walked us through the very tedious process that he had to go through. Over 200 hours, by the way, of reading these text messages in her iCloud account. He set a filter from when Lori and Chad met, the date they met, up until that iCloud account became inactive, which was shortly after the welfare check on the kids. So he walked us through some of the things of how he determines what's relevant to the case and what's not. They typically look for a common theme, and then they follow that theme, and that's where the evidence typically leads them. The theme in this case, of course, Lori and Chad.
Let's talk about it. The obstacles that these people who all ended up dead were referred to as obstacles. Can you provide us a little bit more context about what was said between Lori and Chad?
We haven't got that far yet. Court ended at noon on Friday, and so today is going to be what I think could be one of the biggest days of this trial so far. He has indicated that in this iCloud account that the deaths of the children and Tammy were discussed. I expect we're going to hear that. At this point, we really haven't had a lot tying Lori to the actual conspiracy on Tammy. So I really do think that this is the day where all of it's going to come into show. She was aware of what happened to Tammy and possibly her own kids through this iCloud account. They were very free using it, just weren't smart, obviously, which is a good thing for justice.
Well, here's what's so interesting about that. I've said before, we don't have like that smoking gun, a secret conversation between everybody saying they're going to kill the kids. Maybe we're going to see something like that. Before we get into that, though, what was the context of the messages between Lori and Chad? What did we know?
There were a couple of messages. Well, actually, what's interesting is the very first contact, or the very first time we see Lori and Chad digitally connected, is the last day of the conference that they actually met at. That conference lasted 2 days. On that very last day is the first time Lori entered in Chad's phone number into her iCloud under a name called Bishop Shumway. So we know they're both still married, got to do it incognito. And then they just followed that account. Now, we see very early on, Chad had asked Audrey, who previously testified just last week that Lori threatened to kill her when she wanted to dissolve the friendship, where Chad had asked Audrey to be a friend to Lori, reach out to her. She needs somebody like-minded to talk to. What we also learned was that this Audrey lady basically agreed to be a buffer between Chad and Lori so that Tammy wouldn't find out about the affair. That was one of the very first text messages on this. It was very interesting because we didn't hear any of that when Audrey testified.
By the way, I saw this message between Lori and Audrey where I think Lori wanted to meet up with her. Am I right about that, or talk to her? Like, Lori reached out, right?
Lori reached out. Chad had kind of arranged this, and Lori was the first to respond. And the text message essentially just is Audrey telling her she has a crazy work schedule. These are the best times to talk. Yeah. And she was aware of the plans that Chad had said Tammy would die before she was 50 and that Lori eventually would be the person that he would marry. So she was kind of in deep from the very beginning with these two, just acting as that middleman so that Tammy Daybell wouldn't become suspicious about the affair. The text messages go on to where you see in the very early days Lori telling Alex, I've been doing some work and found some things out about you. You see Alex is very curious. Hurry up, I want to know. And she says, well, maybe tomorrow. So you start to see the very beginnings of this elevated status.
What was that about? I was reading. I was trying to understand what those communications were between Alex Cox, her deceased brother, who the evidences seem to suggest is the person who killed the kids. What were the conversations about between Alex and Lori?
Well, we had that one where we really don't know what she found out about him. I would assume maybe his warrior status, his protector status, bring him in the fold, give him some sense of purpose. He seemed like he was a very aimless person. So I think that you could see very early on she was getting him on board. And then it moved on to at one point he said to Lori that Charles's body was still alive. So we weren't given a time frame of that, but you see early on the planning and the Charles has got to go. And that was something also that was made clear in these messages by Lori, was that Charles needed to be out of her life. So I think what's coming is going to maybe blow our minds today. Anything
about financial motive? Remember, the idea is that they kill the kids in order to receive the benefits, the Social Security benefits, kill Tammy, insurance payout. Anything like that in the text messages?
He hinted at that on Friday. We didn't get that deep into the text messages yet, but I do think that will come today. He said there was financial motive discovered in these text messages. So financial motive, discussion of the murders. This is going to be an explosive day, I think, in this trial.
Okay. Well, what about the flirtation between Lori and Chad? I mean, we kind of got a little into that, right?
Yeah, you're going to ask me about that, aren't you? First thing this morning. Yeah, so there.
Well, actually, that's not true. That's not true. I waited till towards the end of my questioning to get into the flirtatious. So, for anybody who don't know, what were these communications between Lori and Chad, two people who were having an affair, and then ultimately married 2 weeks after the death of his wife?
Well, Chad texted Lori apparently from states away. She visited him in the shower that morning, and his expression was, wow. And there was some other talk about getting together and yeah, you could just imagine, but it was gross, and the jury just looked a little grossed out. Now, I will tell you, though, one very powerful moment on Friday, even though we had a shortened day, was when this FBI agent read the text message that Lori sent to Charles's adult sons, just telling them, hey, guys, your dad's dead. And then they go through the progression of days later. She hasn't told them how he died or really responded in any fashion. That was the most powerful moment, I think, on Friday. The jury would listen to the FBI agent, look at Lori, and there were a couple of jurors that just look absolutely horrified, Jesse. They understand a lot of these jurors obviously have children. They're kind of around in their 40s. We do have some younger ones, but you could tell that testimony right there totally impacted them at the callousness, and she wasn't escaping some glares from the jury on that one.
Okay, so let's talk about what's going to happen. Prosecution's still continuing on their case. You talk about we might see this bombshell testimony about what these messages reveal. How much longer do we have of the prosecution's case? What do we know about the defense's case? And when can we expect closing arguments?
That's all good questions. I have heard this could be the last witness for the state. I imagine it'll take all day between direct and cross. He has a very lengthy PowerPoint walking us through the progression of these text messages. Then we'll have cross-exam. I've heard the defense, if they even put on a case, it may be one or two. Some people have said zero. So if we finish up today, it's not out of the question. We could have closings either tomorrow or Wednesday. I really do think this is going to go to the jury at some point this week.
And do we have any idea about the verdict watch, in terms of, as soon as they finish the closings, we're immediately going into verdict watch, and how long it might go or anything like that?
That's going to be my questions as soon as I walk in the courthouse today, Jesse. I should have an update around the lunch hour about how that's going to go, what kind of a heads up we're going to get. Sometimes we get 20 minutes, sometimes we get an hour. So hopefully I'll find all that out and bring that to you at the noon hour.
And let me ask you this, in terms of the defense, Any idea where they're going to go? Any inclination that Lori Vallow Daybell is going to take the stand?
You know, we've all talked about it. I can't imagine they would tell her it's a good idea, but it seems like she hasn't listened to them thus far with the mental health not coming in as well as wanting the speedy trial. So anything's possible with Lori. She's always weaseled her way out of tight spots with law enforcement up till now. So I would not be surprised if she took the stand. I doubt it, but I'm here for it, Jesse. I'll give my right arm if she does.
All right. Gigi McKelvey, thank you so much. You're going to head back into that courtroom, and as you said, you're going to give us an update later on in the program when we know more. Thanks, Gigi.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. So that is all that I have here on the network. I'm going to be signing off, but don't go anywhere because we are actually going to be switching gears, and we're going to have more trial coverage for you right after the break. A lot that we're covering here on Law and Crime.